Go ahead and get started. I do see folks kind of popping in here, and I'm sure they will sort of catch on as we go. So I'm going to get my presentation going here. We're going to go ahead and get started. So good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining the Violence Prevention Partnership team as we proudly roll out the Choice Cycle 11 grant program and the final grant cycle for this current iteration of Measure O funds. I'm happy to talk more about the future of Measure O at the end of this presentation as well. So my name is Magali Tejas, and I'm the Director of Community Engagement for the City of Santa Rosa. And in addition, I oversee many of the operations of the Violence Prevention Partnership with the help of our tiny but mighty team here, who will be introducing themselves in just a bit as we walk you all through the application and really the request for qualifications process. So very quickly, I just wanted to give a shout out again to our incredible team of folks who are presenting with me, because for the most part, with the exception of Serena, who will be speaking as well, we're incredibly grateful that this team is a newer team. So lots of great, fresh energy, but Serena is really going to give us that background, that context, that history with this program, because this will be the first kind of time that we as a team launch into this effort. So if for any reason we don't know today the answer to your question, we will definitely work very quickly to get you that information. And we also like to encourage to use the Planet Bids platform in case other people have the same question or a similar question, and we'll talk a little bit more about what Planet Bids is and kind of how to access the different documents that we'll need. So we'll just jump into the next slide, please. So we're going to be giving everyone today a tour of the process, the timeline, requirements, history, background, context, as well as the actual request for a qualifications document and application. So please, again, at any time, feel free to ask questions. And to get started, I'm going to have Serena kick us off on the next slide, please.
Hello, everybody. I'm Serena Lino, as Magali introduced. I have just a little bit about me. I have a very long history with the Violence Prevention Partnership and was a part of the team for 18 years, as a matter of fact, and used to run this program. And I've since moved on, but given the transition that has been happening with the team, I'm coming back to help them a little bit with this process. So that's why I am here today. So it's good to see some friendly faces it's been a few years. So good to see you all. All right, with that, so many of you are well versed in the Choice Grant Program and Measure O, but for the sake of just reminding everybody and creating that foundation and the basis for what we're going to be doing with the RFQ this year, and for those of you who are new, I think a good little refresher to help understand where we started and why we're here where we are at now and what we're going to do for the remainder of Measure O, I think is really important. So, all right, so Measure O, the current public safety version of Measure O, began in 2004. And at the time, there was a huge uptick in youth and gang-related violence that was going on in the community. And so local stakeholders ultimately created this concept of this public safety tax measure to help fund critical services to help address the problem that we were experiencing. And so in 2004, voters passed Measure O, and then it began in 2006, officially, the Choice Grant Program. Sorry, I'm moving my little screen around so I could see this. Oh, Zoom. Measure O, or the Measure O itself has 20% that goes towards violence prevention efforts. And of that 20%, 35% of that funding goes directly towards this Choice Grant Program. So right directly into the community via these grants. The remaining 65% goes towards supporting the staff, to implement the programs, as well as recreation, who then provides a whole host of different programs for youth and families in the community, and then the associated staff that is required to do that. So a lot of funds are going into the investment in the community. So fast forward, we've had multiple strategic plans over the years. And in the last strategic plan, which some of you were a part of, from 2017 to the current year of 2022, we were really looking at honing in on what those critical key programs and needs were for the partnership as a whole. This recognition that we're coming towards the end of the tax measure. So what did we want to do to get us through this kind of last years? And so we re-envisioned the mission. Originally, their mission was reclaiming our youth for their families, schools, communities, and futures. And then so we shifted gears a little bit and said we're looking at strengthening youth and families and building a safe community by leading, mobilizing, and aligning our community resources. So it was really around how do we build that resilience within youth and families so that they could then support themselves, as well as having the additional services that we help to provide to help to support them as well. And then as the partnership itself, how do we lead, right? So what is it that we want to do from a leadership perspective? Then we're going to mobilize that. So we got to work together to do it. And then we're going to align all of the different resources that are going on in the community to help us get to that ultimate mission. So that's kind of where the mission came from. And many of the partners were very involved in the design of this particular mission. So, and that's where part of the grant program comes in, is to say, okay, here's our resource that we have control of, and where do we want to then direct those resources? So furthermore, in 2016, well, some of you knew that we used to be the Mayor's Game Prevention Task Force. We shifted gears and rebranded. I'm escaping on the year that we did that, but we shifted gears and took more of a public health model approach, recognizing that, there's more to it, to the situation. We can't just focus on the violence piece itself. We need to understand what is contributing to that violence and why is it occurring in the first place. So part of that was the creation of the 2016 Community Safety Scorecard, which really identified the key metrics and key indicators that help us understand from a data perspective around what is contributing towards the violence that we were experiencing. And we'll go into some of that and how that pertains to the grant program in some future slides. And then additionally, in preparation for any of the RFQs that we do for the grant program, we always do a comprehensive community needs assessment, which really engages different areas of the community and of the different partners to help identify what the current needs are. So the Community Safety Scorecard established some foundational metrics, but sometimes those are a point in time and we don't always update those. The community needs assessment is really looking at what is relevant right now, so that when we direct it helps to inform where we then direct the resources through the grant program. Through that, and then Magali, am I turning this over to you now?
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. So as Serena mentioned, we've used a number of modalities in order to arrive where we are today in this process. And last year, the partnership conducted a community needs assessment, which gathered updated input from the partnership's operational team, crisis response team, youth focus group discussions, parents and community surveys, and research on effective evidence-based practices to prevent, intervene, and reduce various routes of violence among youth. So from those resources, we were able to put together themes and focus areas which outline our most current and highest needs when it comes to violence prevention. And again, linking it back to the 10 roots of violence, which is something we worked with Upstream Investment on, and the crux of the most critical needs for our youth and families. And again, with the effort of disrupting violence. So we found that our local community, in alignment with everything else that we mentioned, would like us to address some of the following areas in our funded agencies to do that. And we'd like to partner and work with organizations who are deploying programs which address issues affecting our local community, organizations who are addressing barriers to accessing resources, programs which address gaps in programs and services for youth, as well as working directly to address homelessness among transitional age youth, which is 18 to 24. That was definitely something highlighted throughout the different tools that we use to put this assessment together. So I think for our next slide, we're going to introduce our team member, Madeline, if you want to introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for being with us today. My name is Madeline Brown. I'm the Senior Administrative Assistant for the Office of Community Engagement. So this next slide, and you'll also see up here the page numbers that we are referencing on the top of these PowerPoints are in reference to the RFQ itself, just for more elaborate detail and a little bit more thoroughness for each of these slides that we're presenting today. So this will be discussing the process and timeline. For cycle 11, this cycle will be over the course of 2.5 years. So starting July 1st, 2022 and ending on December 31st, 2024, as that is when Measure O from 2004 is ending. So we wanted to make sure that this final cycle is extending over that final period so we don't leave any funds left unused. So in order to access the RFQ, as everyone clearly is here today on the webinar, you went to the Planet Bids, and that is where you can also go ahead and submit questions of any kind after this orientation and going up to February 10th. If you have any further questions as far as the documents to be submitted for your RFQ. The deadline for the RFQ will be February 17th. That is a Thursday. That is before a long weekend, so keep in mind there is the President's Day that coming Monday. So February 17th, no later than 5 p.m. We will be requiring not only a digital copy, but also 10 printed copies to be handed to us in person. I will be at City Hall on Thursday, the 17th, and we'll be accepting the hard copy RFQs from 12 to 5. So I can make sure that we have every document needed for that completion from each agency. And you will also receive a signed document stating that we have received all required documents for that RFQ. Then the application review will be between the months of March and April. There we will be meeting with our grant review team who will go over the approved request for qualifications. Then the recommendation notifications, the award letters and the denial letters will go out in April through an email as of right now. So be sure to have that main point of contact clearly stated on the RFQ so we can make sure that they receive the information. Finally, the funding recommendations will be submitted to council for the council date on Tuesday, June 7th, 2022. We do say tentative just in case there are any, what's the word I'm thinking of? Any delays that we experience on the legislative side of getting some information through. But currently we are going for June 7th for the presentation to council. And the funding overview, we will have a per funding year cycle, which is July 1st, 2022 through June 2023. We will have $750,000 available in funding per year. We have a max of $150,000 per agency. You can request more, but the max that we are able to give is $150,000. With that, we do require a 50% match. And of that 50%, 25% can be in kind. Here we have a 2.5-year funding cycle. So again, we are stating that it is going all the way through December 31st, 2024, again, just to close out the Measure O cycle. The proposals that you are requesting will be for 1 year. So that initial July 2022 to June 2023, again, is for that initial proposal. And the second year and that additional 6 months, which we're considering that third year, is contingent upon the successful completion of that first year. So then I will go ahead and bring it over to the overview. Funding categories, I believe, Magali?
Serena.
Serena.
Thank you. Okay, so funding categories, and I saw a question in the chat around, is that max 150 per year over the 2 years? I believe it's per year. So in recognition that, there is the 2.5 year process. So just, keeping that in mind that the third year is technically just half the year. So and obviously it's your best guess, best estimate for now, but recognition that it's also a winding down of the programs because it'll be the final funding cycle. And of course, always a disclaimer, subject to council approval and availability of funds. So, okay, so funding categories. As I was mentioning in the last slide, I talked about related to the scorecard. We identified some key areas in the scorecard that said, all right, if we're going to use this data-driven approach, where are the key areas that we would need to focus in to address the data points that we had identified? And then we overlaid a literature review, essentially, of what are the best, the evidence-informed practices that would best address the situations that we were encountering with the violence and the public health approach. So where that led us was to focus in these 4 particular areas. So category 1 being school readiness, looking at getting kids ready for school, right? So that 0 to 5, and it's not even just 0 to 5, it's also just getting them ready for the different components of going to elementary, going to middle, going to high school, going to college, like those key areas along the continuum. School engagement and truancy prevention. So how do we keep kids engaged in school so that they stay in school? And so what are some innovative programs that are going to help kids stay engaged? And I think this is a critical area, especially in light of COVID and some of the things that we've been experiencing over the last couple of years. And it certainly has come through the community needs summary of how do we keep kids in school, right? How can we essentially catch up in some ways? Because depending on the different levels that you're in, there, we're seeing kids that have had setbacks in some of that education and then the ramifications of that. So really honing in on the school engagement and truancy prevention. Next category is street outreach, intervention, and mediation. So this is working on the streets with our youth, oftentimes crisis response. It's working with some of the higher risk, the medium to higher risk youth. And how do you intervene once they've kind of gone down that continuum a little further than, say, the prevention end of the spectrum. And then the last category is workforce development. So looking at what do we need to do to prepare our youth for future careers, whether that's to college, whether that's a technical career, whether, it's like a professional career in the sense of being an engineer, and so what do we need to do to help prepare them to be ready for the workforce? So those are the 4 key areas that we're looking at. And let's see here, am I missing anything, Magali?
Nope. That sounds good.
Okay.
Okay, so the funding overview. So here I just want to restate that an agency can submit separate proposals for each category that Serena mentioned, and there's no maximum number of proposals from agencies. So each category will be funded with at least one agency receiving funds like per any of the categories. So next slide, please. So the Positive Youth Justice Model on the City of Santa Rosa Violence Prevention Partnership Strategy is to provide comprehensive services to youth and families using the Positive Youth Justice Model. And we do reference this also in our scorecard as well as our RFQ. So there'll be more information there as well. So this model builds on community connections, positive peer culture, and family engagement. Within this, we really want to look at positive youth development. So service delivery has shifted from fixing youth problems to promoting youth strengths. It also moved beyond programs to relationships that help to develop a set of qualities that support healthy youth development in the face of adversity, also known as resilience. So when youth are exposed to positive relationships, opportunities, and support systems, social and personal competencies are developed that help reduce the likelihood of engaging in risky behaviors, right? So we all know that. So rather than utilizing deficit-based approaches, we really want to focus on the youth's strengths, right? So that's going to be a big piece of, what we look at. Trauma-informed care. So those of you that have been partnering with us in the last year and a half know that we've really dove deep recently into trauma-informed care in terms of making sure that not only that our violence prevention team internally, our staff is informed and educated in this discipline, as well as our partner agencies. So most notably, we've partnered with the Hannah Institute for the last 7 to 8 months in order to collaboratively learn not just about trauma-informed care and how we include that in our delivery of services, but how race-based trauma is incredibly important to factor in as we develop programs, recruit youth and families, and deploy our services. So we want to be, use this innovative behavioral health approach and, which views violence as a public health issue. And in terms of our wraparound approach, I just do want to take a quick second. Irma, if you can unmute yourself and say hello really quick to everybody so everyone can see your wonderful face.
Hi, everyone. My name is Irma. I'm the wraparound coordinator for the Violence Prevention Partnership. If you have any questions about how our wraparound services work, please direct message me and I'll email you and we can set up a chat, and I can also send you a flyer that gives you a breakdown of all of the services that I handle. Thank you.
Thank you, Irma. So the wraparound approach is going to be really important in the way that we view the work that's happening. So we all know this is an effective approach to capture youth's variety of needs and strengths, right? So now I'm going to turn it over to Serena to talk about these next 2 points.
Okay, so place-based initiative. So again, this was born out of the scorecard initially. And what it says is, it's not just a scorecard. It also came through the community needs summaries process as well. And it's really 2 key factors. One is the scorecard identified these high need areas. Really, it was where these concentrated areas of violence was more likely to occur. And there was about 6 of them, I believe, across the city. So the idea was that if we invest resources in these areas, could we turn the curve? Can we move the curve, shift the curve, right, to better outcomes and better data points? So the idea was that we'd be intentional about providing services in those communities, as well as serving those same youth and families, even if they have to be outside of the area, right? Because it doesn't make sense. You can't always do in the neighborhood type of programs, right? But as long as you're serving youth and families from those communities, it's still that place-based effort. The other key thing was every year transportation is an issue, right? Not everybody has the means to get to a program that's out of their particular neighborhood. So part of the place-based approach is to say, no, we need to provide the services in their neighborhoods to make them more accessible. And I think that this is even more true now because of COVID, right? So we have to be innovative and we have to be creative. I think the virtual platform allows us to be even more creative in some programs it works, others it doesn't. But the idea is that we really need to engage these youth and families in new ways. And so I think this place-based approach is even more important now. So there's that. And then the target population, low risk, moderate risk, high risk. So in the RFQ itself, it has some definitions and some criteria that helps to explain the different levels of risk, right? And so low risk is typically more your prevention related programs where they're maybe younger, they're not as entrenched, so to speak, versus the opposite end of the spectrum, which is the higher risk, who maybe have had some involvement with the juvenile justice system, right? Or they've been maybe had troubles in school and maybe they're not in school anymore. So it really kind of runs the range of what you would typically think of as far as a spectrum. So again, there are definitions in the RFQ that further explain and define each of those, but that's the key areas that we're looking at. And so when you do respond in your applications, being really clear about how, what is the place-based approach that you're taking? How do you incorporate the PYJ model? And how are you, which population are you serving and how are you serving them? So really being very clear about how you're addressing these three key areas, because these are the services and the populations that we're looking for. I'm good.
All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Danielle Garduno. I'm the Community Engagement Program Manager here at the Office of Community Engagement. And as Magali stated earlier, I've been with the department for 5 years now, going on 6, but I am actually very new to the Choice Grant Program. I am stepping in to help out with the program moving forward, and I'm super excited to have this opportunity to learn with everybody else as we move through this process. So for this particular slide, the information that I'll be going over can be found in the RFQ on page 10, section C. And this really pertains to when we make funding decisions and we enter into funding agreements with the selected agencies. So grantees receiving any funding from the Choice Grant Program are required to actively prioritize any referrals submitted to the partnership through the Guiding People Successfully, or GPS referral system that Irma had just talked about a few minutes ago. These referrals pertain to the services provided by the grantee under the terms of the funding agreement. And grantees are required to respond to referrals within 2 weeks of the initial referral date. In addition to that, grantees are required to participate in a couple of different monthly meetings, including the partnership's policy team. So the grantee's executive director shall attend the policy team meetings every other month. The executive director, if they are located outside of Sonoma County, they may appoint a representative to attend in their place. However, the meetings are occurring virtually now. We're hoping to transition back into in-person, hopefully sometime this year as things ease up with the pandemic. But for now, these meetings are virtual. In addition, grantees will be required to participate on the partnership's operational team. So this is for grantees that provide direct service, and they must maintain a current memorandum of understanding, or MOU, which indicates the applicant's commitment and confidentiality to participating on the operational team. Grantees will assign a primary and alternate member and ensure consistent monthly attendance at these operational team meetings. And it's really important that if you have staffing changes, you need to send somebody new who is not part of the memorandum, that you notify us right away so that we can update that memorandum, as this team talks a lot about very confidential information. And so that will be really important to keep our team up to date as to who those representatives will be. In addition, there are requirements for our grantees to participate in the multidisciplinary assessment and referral team, or MDART, to participate in case discussions and provide case management services for our referred youth. There is a requirement for grantees to participate in the city's annual Violence Prevention Awareness Series in collaboration with our staff. You will work with our staff to identify a month to host an event and facilitate any necessary violence prevention awareness planning meetings, outreach efforts, attending events, etc. And you must budget this in your budget application, as funds that you will receive will go towards these events. So no additional funding will be provided for these events outside of your funding. And finally, include the partnership's logo on all marketing materials related to Choice funding, including but not limited to social media, flyers, events, commitments, and graduations. And there will be language provided to everyone in their agreements that outline exactly what we would like you to state. And with that, next slide, please.
Danielle, can I add one thing really quick? And this is specific to the marketing aspect, I
Yeah,
guess, if you will, the logos and such. I think that this is a really key thing right now, especially, I mean, it's been key and, important this whole time. However, because this is the last funding cycle and we're going to hopefully go to the voters,
yes.
we'll see when, if it's going to be this year or if it'll, we're still figuring that out. But I think the more that we educate the community about the impact that we are having collectively is as important as it's ever been, right? But even more so now. And so I just want to underscore that as much as possible, since I have a captive audience. And it is a part of the grant requirement, but just it is crucial right now that we get the message out as much as we can, because if voters don't pass this, all of this funding towards agencies goes away, and we would hate for that to happen. So just wanted to underscore that a little bit more. So that's all. Thank you.
Thank you. That is very important as we move forward. We definitely want this to be revoted and passed by the voters. So thank you. Next slide. So now we'll go ahead and move into the RFQ page by page, but please remember that feel free to submit questions in the chat box. And then we'll also take some questions if you use the raise hand feature as well. So Magali, do you want to do that now or just continue to use the chat box?
I just wanted to get a quick pulse if anybody has any, it's okay to ask some of these questions 2 or 3 times, because I know it's going to be a lot of information. Any specific questions coming up right now before we launch into this part? Okay, if not, again, we'll definitely use the chat box. Okay, so we're going to give the 25-cent tour of the RFQ. So if we miss anything, please feel free to jump in and say, hey, just clarify a little bit more about this. But we do feel that a lot of you have done this process with us. So you could probably teach me a thing or two about this. So anyway, so we do have a specific question here that can be, okay, let me bring this up before we get into this. A specific question about, can you explain what it's meant to be bound with a heavy clasp in a 3-ring binder? Madeline, do you have any more information about, as people submit their hard copy?
I have that on page 18 that I'll go over here in just a moment. I don't have it verbatim memorized, but I believe 3-hole punch, I believe just clasped, not stapled, because what we are basically going to be doing with those hard copies is compiling them into individual binders to provide to our grant review team. So we just want to make it as easy as possible to get all that information in there so that they can have the hard copies with them. But again, yeah, I will go over just a few more details as far as those specific documents and how they should be created.
So do you want it in a binder?
Oh, I see. No, not in a binder. No, just a clamp. Yeah, 3-hole punched in a clamp, 10 copies.
So one of the really big ones of this, you mean?
Yeah, maybe a little bit bigger than that.
Yes. Okay.
I would
good
imagine.
Wonderful. Okay. Good question. Okay. So when you open this document, which you will be able to access through Planet Bids, you're going to see the first page is going to clearly outline our date. So this is going to impact July 1st, 2022 to December 31st, 2024, right? So that's going to be the full scope of the years. And we did launch this starting January 10th, and the application due date again is February 17th. Super important. We will talk more about how to submit your application the day of, but we'll go into the next page real quick. And then this is just a quick table of contents. As you look through the RFQ, this will help you better identify where some of the different documents can be found. And we'll go to the next page after that. Go ahead, Madeline.
Navigating my mouse, you would think I would have it by now. Okay, so just a little bit more detail as far as the timeline here. We have clearly at January 25th for the assistance orientation. The deadline, again, to submit the RFQs is February 17th, Thursday the 17th at 5 p.m. Again, we do require a digital version submitted to the Santa Rosa Partnership email address, santarosapartnership@srcity.org, as well as 10 hard copies to be submitted in person. I will be there receiving them at City Hall. We are in room, I'll call it room 7, where we'll be accepting those documents. And you will receive a signed letter as well as an email letting you know that we have received your RFQ. The application review process will be in the month of April, where we will have our grant review team go ahead and go over all the criterias of the RFQ and review all documents. And we will then provide a notification late April to all the agencies who submitted their request for qualifications. This will be submitted through email, so please keep an eye out. Santa Rosa Partnership will be the primary email that is used to notify agencies. Last, we will go ahead, sorry, not last. Also in April, we will go ahead and work with those individual agencies who are approved to receive funding for this grant cycle, and then take it to council June 7th, and services begin. Again, no prior services can be contributed to the cycle 11 prior to July 1st, 2022. Any questions on the timeline?
So I think there an update in that people can still submit their questions?
Yes, thank you. Yes, I thank you very much for bringing that up. Even though we did close the RFQ questions last week, we have just reopened it today. As we understand, going through and filling out all the exhibits that are going to be required for submittal, you may have questions. So therefore you can go ahead and submit those questions through Planet Bids. Those come directly to us, and then we get those answers posted back up onto Planet Bids. So it's very transparent for everyone to see. So we're not answering individually. Please, I don't want this to sound rude. Please don't reach out to us individually for those questions. It does need to be through Planet Bids. We love you all. We're so happy you're here, but to make sure that everyone is aware of all the questions and all the answers being provided for this grant cycle, please go ahead and submit those questions through Planet Bids.
Thank you. I think we can go to the next page. So the entry criteria is pretty, basic. Any government agency, which includes school districts, which is really wonderful, a nonprofit who has 501c3 status, and also any recognizable association of people with a fiscal agent, right? So if there are groups of folks doing this work, as long as they can get a fiscal sponsor, then we'd love to have their application, as well as an agency. Let's see, must be able to provide service in Santa Rosa, California city limits, or clearly provide services for Santa Rosa residents. So that is something to take into consideration as you think about the target population, which we kind of talked about here. The funding priorities, again, going back to the slides that Serena shared around category 1 being school readiness, category 2, school engagement and truancy prevention, category 3, street outreach, intervention and mediation, and category 4, workforce development. So again, agencies can apply to multiple categories. That's all fair. And so the funding request will be allocated. Again, we're looking at $750,000 for the fiscal year, and agencies can apply to an amount of up to $150,000 per proposal. So we'll go to the next one, please.
Magali, as you're transitioning, there was a question that we had received, and forgive me if you covered this, but for the sake of repeating it, for everybody else's sake, applicants can partner with another agency to deliver the service. There's precedent that's happened before, but the key thing is that whatever agency is submitting the application is the primary agency, and therefore required to ensure that compliance is happening with whatever sub-agency they're partnering with. So the onus is ultimately on the primary agency to ensure that everything is submitted properly and the insurance and everything is collected appropriately. So, so just so you know, and because sometimes some of the smaller agencies maybe don't have the bandwidth to do such a large program. So we have seen partnerships in the past. So I just wanted to put that out there because it was a question that was received outside of the plan of bids process. So.
Thank you, Serena. So going into part one of this, again, just a quick overview of, the mayor's, the history of the Violence Prevention Partnership, as well as Measure O. And then we go into the next page of that. You will see in the next page, there's a quick little glimpse of our strategic plan and the areas that most apply to this, as well as you'll find a link to the entire 2017 to 22 strategic plan. And then the next page, please. I think, Madeline, you're going to talk about funding allocation.
Thank you. So as we've stated several times, but this funding cycle for cycle 11 will be up to $750,000. The agency can receive up to $150,000. The funds are available and included in the city's budget. The service provider, contingent for the year 2, as well as that year 3, again, that final 6 months of funding. It is contingent on the funds are available in the city's budget. The service provider has achieved its goals in year 1. The target population will continue to benefit from the program, and the service provider has satisfied all contractual requirements. It is very imperative that the agreement guidelines and the requirements for this grant are followed correctly, as we are the final fundings for each agency are completely contingent on the completion of a successful year 1.
Thank you. And Serena is going to walk us through really quick on the biennial process.
Yeah, so just as a reminder for folks, biennial process just means that we do these RFQs every 2 years instead of every year, like it had been done in the past. And we made that switch back in 2013. Caveat being that this time is the last time, so it's technically not a biennial process, and we got a little bit of a delayed start this year. So there's a few little caveats on each end of this particular RFQ, but that's basically what this means. It's essentially every couple of years. So.
Thank you. Danielle?
Okay, sorry about that. This section D here is just to reiterate that the Choice Grant Program serves the needs of for our youth and families have been identified through the following steps, including the strategic plan, our updated community needs assessment, which we did in 2021, our community safety scorecard, evaluations through our current Choice Grant Program partners, and results-based accountability. All of this information can be found in part 1, and then the target population and funding categories again can be found in part 3 under services requested.
Thank you. So in this page, we just want to highlight again the evaluation criteria. 50% is going to be the program narrative. We are going to walk through that a little bit more, but looking at the agency's mission and funding category, the program description, demonstration of need and target population, and program structure. 25% is going to be staff qualifications, and the other 25% will be past performance and evaluation. So other great information on this page, but we're going to take you all on to page 9. We're going to go straight into part 2, which are the requirements. And Serena is going to give us more information on section B, which is the funding matching requirement.
Yeah, so most of you are familiar with this, but the Choice Grant Program does require a match contribution for every Measure O dollar that is received, and because the intent is that Measure O is supposed to enhance the services that are in the community, and then we want the grant agencies to partner with us and enhance it even further. So there is a 50% match requirement, 25 of which can be a maximum of 25% can be in kind. So what we're looking at here is to bring in new dollars or other dollars to help bolster what Measure O is able to provide. So we did not increase it this year. There had been in years past, we had a steady increase of that because the idea was that as Measure O was ending, we wanted to sort of flip the scale essentially, but we're going to be maintaining that at the 50% threshold like we have been in the last year. So, and you do disclose that in the RFQ itself, and it will be included in any funding agreements, but understanding that sometimes what we project doesn't quite manifest in the same way. So especially, in current times, funding sources are a little harder these days, or they've evolved and they've adapted, to the COVID world. So we understand that. Please know that in advance, but we want you to try to project to the best of your ability what you think you can anticipate. And then the idea is that with each funding agreement, with each year, you just true it up, and then we check in with you along the way. We do a point in time check to see how you're doing with the current status. So, yeah, that's it.
Thank you. Really important part on here as well is the funding participation requirements. So we have been very lenient during the pandemic on some of these for our current agencies because we understand we have been under so many different obstacles and we are all just kind of like trying to get through this the best that we can. So with the hope of when July comes, we will be situated differently and hopefully in a much better space. So some of these requirements are going to be for the grantees to have their executive director shall attend the policy team meeting. That is going to be very important, or have a backup person who will attend in their place. Participation in the operational team, that will be crucial as well. Number 3, participate in the monthly meetings of the multidisciplinary assessment and referral team. We do have our team members here who lead that effort, and also prioritize any referrals submitted to the partnership through the Guiding People Successfully. So that's working with Irma on getting the referrals. Very important. The grantees must respond to referrals within 2 weeks of the initial referral date. They need to participate in the city's annual violence prevention awareness series, which Danielle will talk a little bit more in a couple of pages from now. And they need to include all the partnership logos on. They include partnership logos on all of the marketing materials related to TOYS funding, including but not limited to social media events, commencements, and graduation. So all of that's super important. So we're going to go ahead and skip to the next page, and we're going to talk about insurance.
So insurance requirements are absolutely necessary for any organization who we go into contract with. The good news is the insurance is not required upon submission of the RFQ. It will only be required for those who have been approved for the grant, which is clearly stated in Exhibit F, the exact items which are required to be on your insurance certificate and how much, as well as the wording. Sometimes this can be one of the last items that we gather from the agency, so please just refer back to that. Normally, if you were to just send the Exhibit F, which again shows the insurance requirements, to your insurance agency, they'll be able to develop that certificate for you right away. We do need to make sure that we always have them up to date. Sometimes insurance certificates expire after 6 months, sometimes after a year. It'll usually be me sending my main contact for that specific organization the request to receive the updated certificate. Always feel free to just send it to me ahead of time before the expiration date, but if not, I'll be knocking on your door for that certificate. But again, it is not required that we receive any insurance information with the initial request for qualification from these agencies, only if you are approved for this grant process.
Wonderful. And Danielle's going to walk us through this.
Yes, so I will not spend a whole lot of time on these next couple of pages here, but I just wanted to point out that the information that Magali and Serena were talking about regarding the Positive Youth Justice Initiative, which includes positive youth development, trauma-informed care, our wraparound approach, and kind of the domains that are within these categories are really outlined in detail on the next couple of pages, along with information that Serena went over earlier about place-based initiatives, our target population, including the low, moderate, and high risk categories, and our funding categories and priorities, including school readiness, school engagement and truancy prevention, street outreach and mediation, and workforce development. Those can all be found from pages 12 through, I believe, 16, correct? 15, 16?
16.
17. Thank you.
All right, part 4 for the submission and exhibit instructions. Here we will have the information specifically on how we are needing to have the documents provided to me. So applicants must submit one electronic version by email to Santa Rosa Partnership at srcity.org, one original with the appropriate signatures, and 10 bound copies. Again, those bound copies can be in the clasp. Please don't have them in a pre-existing folder. No lamination required either. And, again, please indicate, with the Post-it, which is the original that has the actual wet signatures. All copies must be 3-hole punched and include a table of contents. All copies must include tabs indicating the following sections: the application narrative, the exhibits, and the financial statements. All applications must be complete and hand delivered to myself at Santa Rosa Avenue, 100 Santa Rosa Avenue. It says room 6, but since we're going to have the door open at room 7, they're right next door to each other. I'll have good signage there for you. Don't worry. I'll be receiving those hand delivered copies no later than 5 p.m. on Thursday, the 17th. And again, for this, any submissions prior to the 17th, please contact me directly to schedule a handoff. For the most part, we're really trying to have that final day, the 17th, be that hand-in date. But if you are wanting to drop it off, if you're adventurous, a week before the deadline, great. Just let me know and we can schedule a day and time to meet at City Hall so I can receive all those documentations. Let's see the next. Page 19, this is going to be a checklist of everything that we do need. So in section 1, we have this top section right here of everything of the exhibits that will be required upon the delivery, upon this February 17th deadline. These items are not required: D, E, F, G, H, and M. These will only be requested for the agencies who have been approved for the grant for Choice Cycle 11. The request for qualification applications. All applications must include the following sections in addition to the required exhibits noted above and should not exceed 15 pages total, which is not including the cover sheet. So we have those 4 items right there. And then these next couple of pages just go into the detailed descriptions of the exhibits. So if you're unsure of specifically what they mean, these next couple of pages we'll have a little bit more detail for you as far as what each exhibit indicates. I think that's it. Oh, perfect. Final page 22. I think I go, then I go right into page 23 here. This is, again, just another checklist. I will be utilizing this checklist for when receiving all the hard copies. So if there is anything missing, I won't be able to accept it, but you will receive a handwritten copy with my signature on the day of drop off, indicating that the RFQ has been received with all required documents, and then we can go forward again for the required documents. Required exhibits for the actual agreement will be what is indicated below here. And I think after that we start going into the actual exhibits. Magali, go for it.
All right, so here is the fun part of the application. Basic information, just your agency's basic information here. And then we go to the next page. That's when you're going to start to provide a brief summary of the proposed program, a little bit more sort of basic information that needs to be submitted. And then after that, then we're really going to start getting into the program narrative. It highlights here how many, what is the maximum number of pages, and sort of more information about the prompt, the program description, and then just moving on to, the target population is going to be on there, the program structure, and then all the way over until there are going to be some questions sort of in between that will give a little more detail on some of this. And then there's section 2. Then here we're going to get into the staff qualifications. Maximum, we want 2 pages on here. We want to describe each role in implementing the proposed program, describe an experience of your staff working with the identified target population. And then the next page is describing the cultural and linguistic expertise of your staff dedicated to the proposed program. Here's where I'm going to encourage people to really think about some of that work that we've been doing in terms of like the trauma-informed care and sort of oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, I'm blanking on the race-based trauma that we've been exploring as well. I think this is a really great section to sort of identify any of that sort of information here. So I do want to be looking, I want to look back here at the chat if there are any questions.
Yes, there's one actually, which was already asked previously, but we will reiterate again. So we did receive this via email. Can applicants use a Word doc of their own rather than filling in the PDF sections? Absolutely. Please just adhere to the maximum page numbers that are outlined here in the narrative section.
Please also indicate the question that you're responding to as well, so it's not just a run-on summary. Make sure we're reading what we know is being asked. Thank you.
Sounds good. Good questions. So we're going to move on to Exhibit B.
Okay, so this is an example budget. You will see that actually within Planet Bids, there is an Excel version of this, which is what you are able to use to input in your budget for, again, proposed for the first year. So you will have the personal costs, direct service, anywhere from, individual salaries. Then you come into section B for the overhead and operating costs. The Game Prevention Conference, I would, in a sense, title that the VPAS, the Violence Prevention Awareness Series, again, because that does need to be incorporated into the budget. And then coming down, of course, to the final program costs. Again, this is just the example. Exhibit B, an Excel document, is just sitting below this RFQ document in Planet Bids. We have Exhibit B1, which is the narrative that is describing each line item that you have in Exhibit B itself. I think we have Exhibit C is the resource table.
Wait, sorry, could we take a quick time out?
Sure.
We have a good question here from
Oh, thank
Melanie. Does the document itself expand to accommodate the pages you indicate, or is there a limit for characters, et cetera, within this document?
For Exhibit B or for Exhibit A, for like the program?
Well, there was a question about whether we could use a Word doc and do the 11 pages for the program narrative. And I didn't know if this document would be equivalent to the 11 pages if it expands, or sometimes, with those kind of boxes, they have character limits and word limits.
I don't believe there's a limit. Serena, I don't believe there's a limit
So,
that this document will allow.
we'll have to get back to you guys on that. To be honest, let's look into it, because I'm not sure what. I never used Planet Bids when I did this before, so I'm not entirely sure how Planet Bids works. And just full disclosure. So let us get back to you. We'll make sure that that's answered.
That would be great, because it could be very different if you're doing it in Word
Right.
for 11 pages versus within the template for 11 pages.
Absolutely agree.
Good
Yeah.
point. Thank you, Melanie. Very good
That's
point.
a great question. And then also we have Can you confirm that year 2 and 3 can be estimates?
Actually,
Yes.
yes,
Mhm.
thank you, Serena. And I believe actually within the exhibit, you're really only, I know this page shows a cost for year 1 and year 2. I believe though for the actual Excel document that you're inputting in, you're only going to be inputting in the first year, I believe. So it's not going to have the estimated of year 2 and year 3. But if it does, and I will double check on that, it absolutely can be an estimate.
Okay, one more question. Earlier you mentioned cost for hosting one of the monthly events should be put in the budget. Do you know how many people would be attending and what type of cost would be associated? That's a great question because we have been really working with folks who want to do some of these events virtually because of the pandemic. So just want to mention that is an option as well as if you wanted to host your event virtually. In person be wonderful if it is safe to do so. But in terms of like costs, that is a great question.
Yeah, and really, getting to that, how many people would be attending? I think it really depends on your particular event. What is your goal for the event? You get to plan it. You get to plan the format. If it's in person, right? It could be a small event, or it could be something larger if we're allowed to do that. There's no health order telling us that we can't. It's really up to you to decide that. And then we can help with some of the other planning logistics, but types of costs for things like that would be like, do you need a permit for the space that you're going to be using if it's in person? Do you need additional insurance? Do you need say you don't have tables and chairs and you might need to rent that or whatever, something like that. Even outreach materials. So the printing of flyers that you might need can also be included in that as well.
Good question.
Danielle.
Okay, I think
In the chat, sorry, that's.
If I could add just one more clarifying point, so just tagging on to what Danielle was saying about the cost for the event, the line item in the description for the section B is really more of your direct costs, right? It's the programmatic elements of whatever that event is going to be. It's not necessarily the staff time associated, because of the staff up above in category A really is where you would want to put the staff time. And then in your budget narrative, you can further spell it out, but really that bottom section is really meant to be more for those direct costs that are like above and beyond. So yeah.
thank you.
Other questions? We're good on the chat.
I think we're good. We're ready for Exhibit C.
So Exhibit C, resource table. This is where you will go ahead and assign a dollar value for in-kind or other non-monetary resources. So this is that 50% match that will be required for this grant. This is where you can go ahead and disclose all the information here as well. E, no, wait, let me see. D, that's not me. Who's D?
Well, I think this is just a general service requirement. So there's, the grantee shall, A through C. A lot of what we recently talked about some of the items that you have to do, like, participate in the Violence Prevention Awareness Series, all of that good stuff, and use our logo. So those requirements are just kind of summarized in that. Exhibit E is a certification and assurances.
Then we have Exhibit F. This is what I mentioned before. This is what will be required for any agency who is going to be receiving this grant. It is not required that we receive this upon the submission of our RFQ on the 17th, but it will be required to go into contract with us.
Okay, sorry. We're gonna go back to Exhibit D and E. We just print and include, don't need to do anything with them. So With Exhibit
Actually,
C.
yeah, you don't need to print it or include those. There is that list. I think Madeline went through it a couple pages ago about what's required for submittal with your proposal. And then there's the list that goes into the agreement once grantees have been selected. This will
Thank
be
you,
part-
yes.
Yeah, this will be part of your agreement is basically what it is.
Right, so what we need by the 17th, I'm just gonna read it real quickly if you just want to jot it down, is Exhibit A, B and B1, C, I, J, K, L, and M for Madeline. But everything else is not required until we actually go into contract with said agency.
Madeline, can you scroll back up to that particular page and just kind of zoom in on that so that people can see what you're referring to?
There we go.
Yeah. Mhm. There you go.
So this section right here is what will be required. And this right here is what will be needed going into contract.
So I think we left
that
it
was
off.
F, all right, so Exhibit G, resolution for government signature authorization. This again, not required for the actual submission of your RFQ. Resolution for government signature authorization, again, not required for the submission of your RFQ. Also, just to let you know, should you have any questions, once we do go into contract with you, should you have any questions on these said exhibits that are being required, we'll be here to answer those questions and how to get those filled out properly. All right, the next is Exhibit H, Danielle.
Yeah, so we talked already a little bit about the Violence Prevention Awareness Series, but really what it is, it raises community awareness and provides education and training on the city's violence prevention efforts in partnership with our choice-funded grantees or organizations throughout the year. This used to be, some of you may have been familiar with Gang Prevention Awareness Week or GPAW. We did that in a 1-week span of time. Then we changed it to doing it within a month, and now we are doing it throughout the year. So each individual organization gets a month to focus in on. This program also provides support, it supports community and civic engagement events through sponsorships and mini grants, although I don't think we're doing the mini grants anymore, just kidding, to support the underserved areas of Santa Rosa. And so here you'll see, again, this is, I believe, not required for the submittal, but when we go through contract negotiations, you will be required to select a month. City of Santa Rosa, so our team already has July and May for years 1 and 2 and July for year 3. So you don't have to worry about those months, but really think about what is it, what type of event do you want to have, what time of year you want to have it in, and be ready to let us know that should you be selected for funding.
Thank you. Okay, so Exhibit I, this is a statement of fiscal agent responsibility. So basically, yes, the agency will fulfill the requirements. And the next one, please, is the service partner agreement. So here, this is just kind of a introduction to who the partners, the grantees are going to be, the program description, and then that you agree to provide, the following. So we're going to go, this one's about like 3 pages, and it's pretty kind of
Holly?
Yeah.
I'll jump in. This particular service agreement here is if you have more than one agency applying. So let's say you have one large agency and they're subcontracting with a smaller agency. The smaller agency or the larger agency will fill this out, and it's kind of like a service agreement between the 2 agencies that will be providing services.
It's also for any agency that you need to partner with just
Right.
in the event to administer your program. So like a school, for example, right? So it basically just links the partnership and says that, yes, everybody is in agreement that we're going to do this together. So,
Thank you. Okay, so then that takes us to exhibit KLM, which are the proof of nonprofit status, and an overhead rate documentation if it's applicable, and then the most recent financial audit or statement from the agency. So can we get to exhibit N?
And lastly, Exhibit N, this is again not required for the submission of your RFQ. This will only be needed for when you do go into contract with us, but this is what is required for each agency to fill out for team members, typically the boots on the ground, the case managers, to attend the operational team meeting. This, is needs to have a authorized signatory, basically acknowledging a primary and a secondary representative to attend these operational team meetings. You're going to have several items to comply with as far as attending this meeting. But again, I believe Danielle mentioned this, if there are any staffing changes, please let us know that we need to provide you with a new MOU to fill out. Magali also mentioned we're going to be kind of cracking down a little bit more on these requirements as far as like who's attending these meetings, how often they're attending these meetings. We really definitely need to make sure that the individuals who are attending these are on this memorandum of understanding. And then with that, you kind of come into a little bit more of a legal jargon at the end of the MOU, which we won't get into. We can certainly get into in detail should we go into contract for this choice. And that is the request for qualifications for choice cycle 11.
Wonderful. There is one more question. Are there any other documents you only need one copy of? So assuming we should include it with the original. I think that's a great question. The audit, so if you have an audit and it's many pages, we could just definitely use the one physical copy and the rest, of course, electronic, so we can share with our grant review team. But Serena, do you know if there are any other documents that we would only need one copy of?
nothing's coming to mind at the moment. I'd have to go through and just refresh my memory, but I know the audit, we only needed the one copy and an electronic version. But other than that, I can't think of any other ones right now, unless somebody else has a question about a particular one. It's been a while for me.
So those are all really great questions. Did any other questions sort of pop up as we were walking through this process? I know it's a lot of information. If this happens to be your first time hearing it, and like I said, it's a collaborative process, so we're all learning together. We will get you the information if we don't know it, but we are going to be working really hard on making sure that this is a successful cycle year or cycle years. Any questions?
Feel
Going
free to
well.
raise your hand
Or just unmute?
or unmute. Yeah.
We're casual. Nobody has any questions? Wow. Okay. So we, I think we did a pretty good job here of doing the rundown. If questions were arise, do you want to, Madeline, do you want to talk about the process of Planet Bids? Like how does somebody submit their question through Planet Bids?
Yes. So obviously with you all here now, you have clearly registered as a vendor in Planet Bids, and therefore you can visit our RFQ page. I believe it is just a section in there where you can type in your question. We received the email directly to our Santa Rosa Partnership email address. If I don't have the answer initially, I will discuss with my team on the answer for you. Then we will resubmit it back to our city staff member who manages Planet Bids, and they will post the answer up there. The idea behind this is to ensure that there is transparency between for every question that's being asked. We want to make sure that it's equal opportunity for everyone to receive those same responses. So again, we love you all, but please don't email us directly with any questions, just so we can make sure that everyone is receiving the exact same information, and nothing is being, cut and pasted along the way. We certainly want you to have all the answers in order to submit this RFQ. We'll receive notification by email if there are. Cassandra, do you mean by any changes in the RFQ? Right, Cassandra.
Sorry, I was trying to unmute. We were recently in another grant process, and they had quite a few changes to it, including deadline and some other stuff. So right now I'm sitting in a paranoid corner with another grant sitting. So I'm just kind of asking if something happened, would we receive email notifications, or do we need to find that through the bid?
If there are any changes, they will be mentioned on Planet Bids. I am.
Yes, they will. We'll also send out an email to this particular group that registered for the orientation, as well as all of our partner agencies as well. We will try to use all of our communication methods that we've used to conduct outreach for this application process to get the word out to everybody.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you very much. It's just a scary thing when you face it, not wanting to email you guys, but also wanting to be diligent if there was a change in where to find it. So thank you very much.
That's a great question. And also just want to state that we've worked so hard to get to this point that we are not going to change anything. Just so that we make sure that we keep the secret sauce. So unless there was some major thing that happened, we are sticking to everything. That's all the dates that are listed on here. So Claire, did you have a question?
I did, but I'm busy being so happy that you're not going to make any changes. Thank you. Another just very technical question. Can you talk more about the rate of overhead documentation exhibit? I think it's L. Yep, L.
So exhibit L. Trying to find that page really quick. Okay, the overhead rate documentation. Serena, do you have some more input on that specific document?
One sec, I'm pulling it up. Okay, one second here. Madeline, what page is that on? I'm trying to find it.
It's one of those internal documents.
It is, yeah. So it's not a document that we provide for them to be filled out. It's in the KLM bundled documentation.
It's towards the end.
Okay, so so long story short, that is like, there is a I think it's federally regulated designation about how much you can charge for your administrative costs, right? And so we basically say, I think we, at least, yes, so we say no more than 14% unless you have a specified overhead rate documentation. Typically, we see this with some of the larger organizations. You don't always see it with some of the smaller ones. So if you don't have it, it doesn't apply, and it would just be the 14%, basically. So.
All right, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
I had to look at it because I had to refresh my memory.
And if your organization has one, you're going to know it.
Thanks. Yeah.
Great questions. Any other questions that came up? Going once, twice. if you think of something, feel free to submit it to Pine Bits. But we are super excited to hopefully be receiving, you know, your RFQs and documentation and going through this process together. So we appreciate all of you. I super appreciate this team that's been so wonderful, you know, helping us work through this. And I just really appreciate all of you, how wonderful you all have been working with us, knowing that we're a newer team. We have all the best intentions, all the best energy. So we will get any answers that we don't quite necessarily have, but we are so appreciative to be able to work with you all. So thank you so much. And I hope you all have a great rest of your day. Have a great day. Bye.